Okay, so one of the things that I worked on this week was doing a little bit of redesign for the cards. So this is the original Ace card design for the physical cards, and there were two main things that I wanted to shift here. The first one, let's take a look at some Magic the Gathering cards. This is basic Magic the Gathering card, legendary version. Our cards don't really have any borders. I threw a couple of small borders on for our legendary cards, but I want to have borders on the non-legendaries because a cool border can still look cool, but it also allows for full art cards to be even cooler. And one other big thing that this solves is that if we are making an online game, then when you play the card onto the game board, you'll notice that in Hearthstone, for example, they don't actually play the entire card. It's just the art, and then you have your attack and health. So we need some kind of a frame so that it can be played onto the game board because just having art with no frame looks really bad. Um, so one piece is adding the frame. That's really necessary for the online game and for some collectability aspects. And then the other part is simply moving the mana symbol up to the top. There are a couple of other little tweaks, like this Hearthstone card really illustrates this well, because Hearthstone is super optimized for gameplay. Uh, the attack and health are really big because in online games you can go beyond the card border. So we're going to do some of that too. Overall, this is also not, I'm not going for a fully polished card here. I want to kind of get to that 80% that nails down the current concept because a lot of things can change here. And I just want to have like the sort of new sketch for the cards. So we'll be starting by looking at three different uh, major card games and kind of picking out the ingredients that they each do really well. And then I'll talk about how I decided to shift things for the card design that I'm working on. So for Pokemon, one of the things obviously that they do really well is the collectability, the whole gotta catch 'em all vibe. So my girlfriend actually pointed this out when we were studying their cards. Even at a glance, even if you were totally illiterate, one of the things that they do super well is the vibrant colors. So say you've no idea what Pokemon are, you don't know how to read any of these things, but you know that when there's a bright purple thing that looks pretty, there's probably other bright colors, and humans just love to collect things. We love our cool objects. And at a glance here, you see all of these bright artifacts, and you kind of want one from each color, maybe more from each color. So this works really well for Pokemon. It works well with that stylized aesthetic, and it doubles down on the collectability, which for Pokemon is the main thing. Like most people just collect the cards, they don't play the game. Um, the problem is that this doesn't work so well for more sort of like mature themes. So if you just put our sort of oil painting epic paintings into this, it doesn't really work with like a bright purple or pinkish color. But it's good to think about the collectability because even with the cards that I've been making, most people are just collecting those as well. So definitely a core ingredient there is how do we make these cards feel super collectible? Magic the Gathering is has continued to be one of the top references because the painting style is so similar. Um, let's look at this first line here. So these are more basic Magic the Gathering cards. They still have some vibrant colors here. So red, green. At a glance, you can tell these pretty well, but it's not quite as stark as Pokemon, where like the entire card is just one vibrant color. Um, Magic has, like you call it your library. They basically have this like spell book aesthetic going on. Times New Roman font, like this is just very crisp, clean. Um, it works for sort of the mature vibe, and there's a lot I think to pull from here. Um, it also, well, one of the things that they had to optimize for is that because they have such large abilities, you have to have these really large text boxes. So this is something where we've gone more like the elegant, simpler mechanics. We can make this text box a little bit smaller and focus more on the art that people have really enjoyed. So this is like their full art compared to like a non-full art, and yeah, I like that comparison a lot too. This is actually another good reference. So this is Magic the Gathering Arena, and when their cards are played, it just goes to the art, and then they pull the ability up underneath. So again, instead of playing the whole card, it can just focus on the art and the text that you need to know, and then you can just hover over these to get the full abilities. Hearthstone is totally on the opposite side from something like Magic, where it's completely gameplay focused. The art is like the smallest out of any of these. Um, the numbers are really big, maximum accessibility, bright white with the black stroke. And this is really great. Like the core ingredient to pick up here is how do we maximize accessibility um, while also maintaining the aesthetic that we want? Because this kind of is getting close to like ugly category. Hearthstone is, I mean, I'm a huge sucker for the design, um, but it could look even better if they didn't push the like bright giant numbers and words. One of the really cool things I'll highlight here, this just shows how much thought that they put into this game, is that when you play one of these cards, you'll notice you have this oval around it. This oval just drops out of the card. You can sort of play this frame by frame if you watch a YouTube video of it. And the oval drops onto the board, and that's what you actually see. The rest of the card just dissolves. Um, it creates this really sort of beautiful shape instead of just like a box. It's quite unique to Hearthstone, and I think it's just like so beautiful. The problem is that you lose even more of the art. So right now, this is not something that I'm optimizing for either. So ultimately, after looking at this and many other physical and digital trading card games, the core pieces to pull from here are the Magic the Gathering layout, and then we'll talk about aesthetic just for a moment. This hand painted look that Hearthstone does is incredibly beautiful. Um, it again works better for their stylized artwork. If I just throw in our art, it doesn't quite feel as good. Our stuff is just a little bit more on like the oil painted side, and this just doesn't. It feels Hearthstone cards feel too stylized. But what I refer to as like this refined hand painted look, this is actually what we've got going on in cards like this. If you zoom way in here, this is actually just hand painted, but it's very tight. So taking some cues from the hand painted look and then applying that to what some people criticize Magic the Gathering cards looking like is very flat. So we make Magic the Gathering a little bit less flat, but use that similar layout and then maximize the art. So this again was the original Ace, and then this is kind of the sketch for where I see the cards going. So a couple things that I'll highlight here is one, the card border. Still trying to keep this as thin as possible. May even take like this bar out at the top. That was kind of just an artifact that got left in there. Um, the black border is often used as well, just so that like when you're shuffling physical cards, it doesn't like you're fine if like the black border kind of gets scuffed up a little bit. It frames the art really well. Like if you just look at like a piece of art at a gallery. A lot of times it's like a white mat and then a black frame. And it's a bit of the cue that I'm taking here. So you have a light colored um, shape that's going around it. That would be the mat, and then you have a black frame. So really taking some notes also from how gallery paintings are often exhibited, because this needs to be universal for a lot of art. And then mana up in the corner. So this now, I actually didn't mention this at the beginning, but when you're holding cards in an online game, you need to be able to see, like right here, you need to see all the mana right at the top. And it's a lot harder to see if it's down at the middle of the card where they were originally for ace. So this has been moved to the top. Attack and health are just much larger for the online game. But then I'll just hop down here for the physical card design, we can just take those icons and make them smaller, and it still works for the physical cards. Now, one part that emerged here, I'll zip around my Figma a little bit. I started by just throwing a border on. We've got a Hearthstone uh, card over here that's on the board. Just went square, threw the border on. Looks pretty bland and not great, to put it lightly. So going across, I started playing with some more vertical aspect ratios. That's a little bit nicer. Where I landed that I'm starting to really like is having this curve. Um, just feels nice, to be honest. Like it's just like a little bit of an interesting shape. I think it allows you to add in these other design elements, the attack and health, and bring a little bit more focus to them. I am playing with the idea of having these circles behind them because it seems like a lot of people have never really paid that much attention to they don't notice the shield and swords. Maybe they will in the online game. I would love that to be true because I put so much time into designing these icons early on. Like one of those things is like a small detail, but I've spent a ton of time working on refining those. But perhaps just having these circles behind really makes the number pop and it unifies the two different shapes. So the curve at the bottom is nice because then when you actually drop it onto the game board, you have something that looks like this. And I like how, kind of like Hearthstone, basically this back part just detaches from the text box and yeah, creates this kind of clean look. And finally, we've got one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning I was aiming for was to have the borderless designs feel a little bit more unique. I think there's a lot more that we can do here to make these feel really special. These aren't even cut out here. But overall, this just allows like us to have the more basic cards at the border and then the borderless versions. So I spent about a day or so on this week. I have a lot more research and other card games down here that I was looking at. Parallel, Altered TCG, another great one to look at. Unfortunately, the QR code looks kind of terrible. Um, and would love to hear what some of your favorites are as well. There's so many of them out there. Marvel Snap, of course, is another really interesting one. I really don't like this style, but it works well for their comics, for the comic style. Um, and yeah, finally, I'll also show like if you're interested in creating your own, I used Midjourney to do a bunch of mock-ups. Ended up keeping a lot of our design choices because I've already put a ton of time into iterating on them and why fix what ain't broken. But these were just mocked up in Midjourney, and it just kind of shows how fast you can just like kind of hit refresh and get um, different text boxes, different frames. Allows you to just iterate really fast. I like this one in particular. Again, this type of banner I think just works a lot better for something like Hearthstone, much more stylized. But again, I'm kind of a sucker for it. I love that hand painted diegetic look. So Yeah, combining Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone ingredients in particular. Overall, I think that this has hit the sort of 80% mark that I want for moving forward. Um, but we'll definitely need to refine a lot of the stuff. Like none of this is actually connected. All of it is very rough right now. But I'd love to hear your perspectives on it. What are some of your favorite card game designs out there? How do you feel about where this is heading? And I hope you all are doing really well.